Hello, and thank you for joining us for the third episode of the Digital Transformation of the Legal Industry webinar series. This episode will discuss an SLW digital transformation case study in application preparation, disclosure intake and docketing, application drafting tools, and production management. This is the third episode in an 8-part series. A recording of the webinar and the slides will be made available to all registrants. Feel free to enter questions at any time using the Q&A feature in the Zoom menu. We invite you to follow us on LinkedIn to see news about other upcoming webinars. And with that, I'll turn things over to our moderator.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. Steve Lundberg here, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be drilling into tools and processes that the firm uses for drafting applications and intaking of disclosures. We got a great lineup of folks today that all have a huge amount of hands-on experience in using these tools and have got some great practical observations. First, I'd like to introduce Andre Murray, who's one of our principals out of our California, San Jose office. Andre represents a number of leading companies out in the Bay Area and is terrific patent counsel. And Andre is going to talk in particular today just about high level about our tool use. We have next up, we have Greg Rabin, who's one of our senior attorneys at the firm. Greg's a specialist in software and in particular can do anything but AI. So if you need an attorney in that area, Greg is on the East Coast, but certainly can represent anybody anywhere. Bill Callwaite, next up. Bill's one of our principals. Bill's a software background as well. Bill's used a lot of these tools and developed his own tool, and he'll talk about that today. And last but not least, we have Chris Palmisano, who's also a principal at the firm. And Chris has also been spearheading our tool usage, particularly around drafting tools. So we're looking for Chris to give us some good practical insights. So with that, we can flip to the next slide. So, we're going to have a couple slides to start with just about application intake and setting, the process up to start flowing, and then we'll go into the meat of this. But anybody that knows, receives a lot of disclosures from clients knows that because there's a lot of manual keying that goes on, it can be error prone. So we typically get requests for application work from our clients by email. Sometimes it comes in through databases that clients post something up in their internal database and we get notified. And all this data gets rekeyed every time, and it's easy to make mistakes. It's expensive, it's slow, and everyone has a different form for this or process. So it's an area that we've been trying to automate more, difficult in some ways because everyone has their own formats. So we've got some data extraction tools that we use across the board for many processes, but we certainly can bring in client forms and emails, and we can apply tools that we have to extract the data into a structured format, and then we can parse that into, for example, our foundation IP system and also in other places. Just a quick plug here about how interoperability is extremely helpful here with being able to hit our API on foundation IP has been hugely beneficial to the firm. And again, I always take a moment to encourage anyone that's getting an IP system to make sure it has a great operability, a good API, because there's just so many things that you can do with them. And as time goes on, more and more companies, third parties are building up a rich ecosystem of cloud-based services that you can get that can interact with your IP systems that go well beyond what the IP system vendors can possibly do. They just have limited resources. So then we'll get these clients, these matters loaded into like Foundation IP, and we have templates in Foundation IP that are customized for each different customers. customer we have or client, and they've got the workflow for that client. So it'll launch all of the typical deadlines that clients expect us to hit, like a draft within 6 weeks, or a proposal within 2 weeks, or final filing within 2 months. Everyone has a slightly different set of requirements, and we program those into our foundation IP templates and we launch them. The other thing that we've been developing more of is automated analytics to feed to our attorneys that come off of these disclosures by going out and automatically sifting through patent databases and finding information that might be pertinent to prior art or other things. So that's basically where Schwegman sits in the digital transformation of the front end of getting applications in. Next, I want to turn it over to Andre Murray to kind of introduce our tool usage. Andre?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so zooming in a little bit here and just kind of looking at some of the drafting tools that we're using, and you'll see a list on the screen there. So we have kind of a whole kind of range of tools that we do make available to our attorneys, really to primarily with the goals of increasing the quality of our patent applications and office action responses, and also assisting our attorneys in just increasing their productivity. A little bit. A lot of these tools, when it comes to quality, are really good at finding kind of what I call the low-hanging fruit on the quality tree, or error tree, if you will. Antecedent issues, reference numerals, and all of the basic stuff that we would expect to see correctly done. But also, a lot of them do provide incremental or small productivity gains, or may have a number of features that each provide a small productivity gain. But if you kind of aggregate those, there's these do add up into real gains, both in quality and productivity. Looking at the list of tools there, you'll see they kind of range from a fully integrated drafting environment, such as the Rowan patents, or as it is formerly known, TurboPatent. Patent draft, also a slightly more full package, down to some other tools which are more specialized and more focused in dealing with certain tasks. And we're going to walk through certain of those with you, just hitting the kind of highlights and what we're finding to be the most useful features. So hopefully that'll give someone a high-level overview of these tools. Internally, we don't dictate that anyone uses these. They're all voluntary, and we find different attorneys, different staff use different tools. For example, our newer attorneys seem to be a little more open to using the fully integrated environment like Rowan patents, whereas attorneys who've been using Visio and Word for a number of years are obviously more comfortable with those tools, and may more adopt Patent Bots or Claim Master as kind of a plugin to help them. So anyway, with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Chris, who's going to walk us through just some thoughts on Rowan patent / TurboPatent. Chris, you there?
Yep. Thanks, Andre. Yeah. So as Andre started to say there, one of the tools that we use is Rowan patents, previously known as TurboPatents. I might refer to them interchangeably as the two as we go through this, but they were recently rebranded as Rowan patents, which is really a standalone application that provides a drafting environment that integrates word processing and drawing tools, as well as some AI or automated analysis as well to help improve quality of the overall product. So here in this slide, we have, this is basically Rowan's statement about what their tool is. So it uses automation and AI to unburden the patent attorney from time-consuming duties so that we can focus on claim drafting and capturing the invention and generating a quality work product. And really the objective here, the way I see it, it's all about more efficient drafting, more efficient review and integration of changes, and ultimately more efficient examination because the application itself may not have as many or any mechanical issues to deal with during the course of prosecution. So prosecution can stay more focused on novelty or the point at hand. So if we can move to the next slide here. So as I started to say, this tool is really a standalone application that includes a word processing aspect, a drawing aspect, and then the analytics or the AI for issue spotting, either in the completed draft as we have here in written in the text, but really you can run the analysis tools at any point during the course of drafting. So this slide just shows a snapshot of what the word processing environment looks like. It's really simple, really basic formatting, basic review tools, and really simple to use, and actually breaks the application into almost a form-based data entry type front end for the attorney to work with, sort of piece by piece through the application. We can move to the next slide here. And so one of the really cool aspects of Rowan patents is that the word processing tool and the drafting tool are fully integrated together, and they share information. So this is a partial view of what the drawing tool looks like. And you can kind of think of this as almost like a Visio Lite type of environment where it's really good for creating block diagrams, flow charts, that kind of thing. But you can also import pictures or even Visio files that are maybe a little bit more complex, and they can be imported and dropped right into the tool. And as you're going through and creating your drawings, the tool lets you assign part numbers and names to each of the parts of the drawing. And then those parts and part numbers can be referred to in the text as you're drafting in the word processing tool. And there's some predictive text aspects as well, where as you're drafting, it'll pick up on tools or rather pick up on terms and make suggestions for better linking the text with the figures themselves. If we can move to the next one. All right, so some of this I touched on already, but why is it helpful to actually integrate those two tools, the text and the drawing? We wind up with much more consistent term usage throughout the specification. So, let's say we have a processor circuit that we're referring to throughout the course of the application. Well, this tool will help us avoid referring to that as maybe a processor in one place, a processor circuit in another place. It'll sort of force us into more consistent usage of those terms throughout the entire application. And same thing with numbering errors. There's really no opportunity here for errors or duplicating numbers or creating any of those really simple mistakes that can ultimately lead to a document that's confusing or includes misnumbered, or worst case is even includes issues that can be identified by the examiner and then just consume our time fixing errors and dealing with remedial issues when really that has nothing to do with the substance of the application. So to the extent we can identify those issues up front and identify and fix them before they even get filed as an application, we're all better off. We're better off, the client's better off, and presumably the examiner appreciates that as well and doesn't have to sift through the mechanics of the application. So one of the really cool features here is that Rowan Patents allows you to seamlessly sort of move different portions of the application around. So what's shown here is a view from the drawing tool where it lays out all the different figures that you have. And with a simple click and drag, you can rearrange the figures, and with that you rearrange the text as well. And when you rearrange the text, it'll also take all the reference numbers that you've added that are associated with a particular figure and renumber them. So what's shown in this figure, if we start at the bottom here, it's trying to show, okay, if we want to move figure 2 to, let's say, the figure 4 position, we can do that really easily. And then that'll bump figure 3 back to figure 2, figure 4 back to figure 3. And it really just becomes a really seamless way to reorganize your document, which can be important, especially during drafting, or maybe once you get feedback from an inventor and they want to see things rearranged or presented in a slightly different manner. It really makes that whole process incredibly simple. Further to that,
Chris, before you move on from the drawing,
yeah, go back.
We got a question in the chat there.
Sure.
Which asks, can we import AutoCAD drawings into the Rowan patent drawing tool?
Yeah, there is a way to import. I think you can import not only Visio files, but also any sort of vector-based graphic file. So those can be brought in and then further edited inside the TurboPatent or Rowan patent environment. So yeah, that is possible. Or worst case, you can import it as a picture and then work on top of the picture. So
yeah, I think that's what you can take any a JPEG image, for example, and drop that in, and then apply the reference numerals and all that to that. So
yep,
perfect.
Yeah. So one other aspect here that's really handy that this drawing is trying to show, or this slide, is let's say that a particular client has some template or some material that they want to include across a number of different applications. Well, we can take that information and really drop it in at any point, as long as it's saved in a TurboPatent file somewhere. We can open the two files and import any of that existing or earlier material or that template, and we can drop it into any place within whatever the current document is that we're working with. And everything gets seamlessly renumbered and incorporated, and it's just a really handy way to incorporate or even recycle information from other applications. And recently I was working on a project with two other attorneys where we each had separate portions of what would become one application, and we were all able to work independently and then just stitch everything together, and we didn't have to worry about assigning figures or part numbers or anything up front, because we knew we'd ultimately just throw it into TurboPatent. It would take care of all the numbering, and everything would wind up as a nice, clean, finished product. So we can move on from this one. So once we have a draft or even a partial draft completed, we can start running some of the analytics or the analysis tools that are built right into the Rowan Patents environment. So this is sort of segmented into two different types of analyses. So they consider analytics in one bucket here and analysis in another. If we can go to the next slide, it'll show that really the results are sort of pooled together. So this is a snapshot of some of the information that we can get automatically from the Rowan Patents environment. So it'll do some predictive analytics where it'll look at your claim language and then try to make a prediction about which art unit you're most likely to wind up in, as well as provide some sort of basic stats about art unit allowance rate, pendency, that kind of thing. So if you wanted to steer your application into a particular art unit, you might be able to change some wording in the claims or the title or whatever, and rerun this tool to try to position your application wherever you most want it for examination. It'll also look at subject matter eligibility and will flag terms in your claims that might be compromising eligibility. So that's almost like a patent profanity or a language check. It'll flag terms that could indicate that the subject matter may not be, or rather terms that you may just want to consider using alternatives to help avoid an eligibility problem. It'll also do a natural language search. So just a really quick sort of patentability search, and it'll turn up usually about half a dozen references that you can either look at and ascertain very quickly whether you seem to have a novelty problem, or can usually just dispense with rather quickly, but nonetheless, it's a good sanity check. And then further from those sort of more intense analytics type operations, the tool will also look at more mechanical things like antecedent basis. It'll present a nice claim tree to help you visualize how you've nested claims. And really just present a good overview of the mechanics of the entire application, and even some of these more in-depth analytics that help you steer the application toward eligibility or toward a particular art unit, which can be really helpful for ensuring more efficient prosecution. And I think that's about it on Rowan. It's really it's a very comprehensive tool, great for pre-filing issue spotting, and also for coordinating work among multiple drafters or multiple attorneys. So yeah, and it's just one of the tools that we use to help increase efficiency and quality here. And with that, I guess I'll hand it over to Greg, who's going to give us a preview of the Harity tool.
Thanks. So I'll go over the Harity tool. So I've used it for approximately 10 applications. I believe we got a license to the Harity tool about a couple of months ago. So the basic process is Harity is integrated with Microsoft Word and Visio, so it doesn't require you to learn to use new software or to learn or to integrate your old patent applications with some new software system that you haven't used before. So basically I open a Word file for the application text, and I open a Visio file for the drawings. And then initially I draft the method claims. When I start out, I like to draft set method claims, and I like to have the inventor look at the method claims to confirm that I understood and claimed the invention correctly, so that if I made a mistake, then I don't spend too much time barking up the wrong tree. And then I put my boilerplate figures into the application. I have several boilerplate figures that I use that Harity can just upload from a server, or I can provide my own figures from my local hard drive from other applications. And the Harity software then converts the finalized method claims into computer readable medium and system claims. And the software prepares a method flowchart that basically follows through the steps of the independent claim, and each step of the independent claim is a block in the method, and it drafts the description of the method flowcharts that supports all of the claims. So it goes through all of the steps of the claim one, and then it says that in some embodiments, each of the dependent claims could apply. And in the last step, I then draft additional specification text or drawings if there's additional information that the inventors provided me that I think could be useful for a person reading the patent application in understanding the invention. And as a result, I'm able to save time on the parts of the work that are more just basically repeating the claimed subject matter, and where being an intelligent patent attorney doesn't add a lot of value. And that we can move on to the next speaker.
Greg, so just a quick question there. So I mean, when the tool prepares the, when it drops the description from the flow chart, I'm assuming you kind of use that as an outline, and maybe you'd probably expand on that. So it's not, or what's your experience there, and also the with the flow charts where it's kind of generating the flow chart from the claims. Do you typically use that as a starting point and then maybe adapt it from there, or is it normally pretty, you can use it as generated by the software?
I typically use this generated by the software because I try to draft claims that are very easy to read for an examiner or a member of the jury or whoever is trying to read the application who might not be very familiar with technology. So I feel like claim one for my applications could be easily converted into a flowchart, and then I can just use the method flowchart and the text that the Harity software prepared by itself. And then I typically add a few more drawings that go into more detail if there's a system diagram that shows the different different computers involved, or if there is a user interface diagram, which could be relevant to some applications, then I add those figures and I describe them separately. Sometimes I do add more text if there's some features of the invention that weren't covered in the claims, then the software would not know about that. And I would have to add that myself.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Thanks for that.
Can I just add that if you're interested in any of these tools, you can reach out directly to the purveyors in Harity. I think you can just probably Google Harity application drafting tool, and or Rowan or TurboPatent. So we are not selling those tools; we're just using them. Harity tool, I just would comment, is nice because it's kind of fully integrated into Word and Visio, so that you operate in your own native environment. So, anyways, we'll move on to Bill Callwade. Are you next?
Yeah.
Or is this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll cover at least the first part of PatentBots. PatentBots is an a la carte tool that sort of like Harity, except not necessarily integrated, although it does have a plugin. You draft in Word, you draft in Visio or PowerPoint or wherever you're doing your figures, and then you simply make use of these tools to analyze what you have, get a report, and see what you might change or not change. So this, you can pick and choose the tools you want. The big ones that I use: automated proofing and Art Unit Predictor for drafting. And the proofing, for those of us, it's just really nice to have a sanity check, especially with things that are as tedious as reference numeral verification. And unlike TurboPatent, this is the sanity check if the tool isn't covering all of your reference numbering for you. Art Unit Prediction works similar to the way it did in TurboPatent, where you get an art unit, some stats on the art unit, and a probability that that's where you'll wind up. And that's just good to double check that your title and claims are going to get the best chance at the patent office. I threw the examiner statistics in here because it's not really a drafting tool, but it's a very helpful tool that comes from PatentBots. And again, it's a sanity check where if you see an office action that you assume is ridiculous, and then you realize the examiner has an extremely high allowance rate, maybe you're the one being ridiculous. Or if they have an extremely low allowance rate, maybe trying to convince that examiner isn't the way to go, an appeal or some other intervention earlier would be more efficient. And then prosecution statistics are also offered. Next slide, please. So on the automated proofreading for application drafts, it's a lot of the standard claim numbering, antecedent basis, term support. So that's term support in the application, and it's term and phrase, which can be helpful. Figures, it'll look at your spec and your figures and check for numbering, check for actual figure reference existence, such, if I've got figure 4 in the set of figures and it's never mentioned in the application, it'll cover that. And then it'll also start to note terms or numbers that are missing from the figures or in the figures and missing from the application. The next slide. Now, the way it works when you don't have the plugin, you simply go to the website and you'll see here, you just can provide the Word document and figure document, and you hit Analyze All to look at the figures and the application and the claims, or you can just do the claims. I tend to do all because it's really quite quick. The lower graphic there just shows you the different reports that pop out and some signals to indicate whether or not there's an issue or not an issue. As you can see here, it does have profanity support in the application and the claims. The numbering of the claims does a tree structure, so you can see dependency visually see the dependencies in the claims. Antecedent basis is claim only. Word support, phrase support, those are support for language in the claim checked back into the application. I just put reference labels up here. And it'll show you the report says, here's the label on the left, it's missing on the right. The other thing it does, you'll see at 24, if you have the same label, the same numeral with different words in the application, then it'll list them as yellow if it thinks they might be related, closely related, just indicating there's a difference, and red if the same word is used for different terms. And so usually you can just go through there, see which ones make sense or don't make sense, and adjust them. The left-hand column are is the reference numeral. So you can just do a quick search for it, find the instances and correct them. Next slide, please. I didn't put the art unit predictor up here simply because it looks very similar to what we saw above with TurboPatent. The examiner statistics, again, this is more for prosecution, although I find it extremely helpful. It provides some really nice things like the background of the examiner, their education level, and how long they've been at the PTO. And that can sometimes inform some actions being taken by the examiner, how confident they are in what they're doing, whether or not someone else is looking over their shoulder. So if you're doing an interview, maybe you need to pull the supervisor in. And then things like grant rate versus the art unit in general and the PTO plus the absolute grant rate. And there's a timing element there. So you can see if an examiner never grants before the RCE and grants very much after the RCE, you might advise your client there's probably going to be an RCE involved here. A percentage of a benefit of interview for this examiner, and they basically just look at applications that were allowed without an interview and with an interview and compare the two. And then appeal statistics and recent dispositions. Recent dispositions, sometimes examiners get stingy with allowances. And so even though they might have a higher allowance rate, changing your activity if they've recently become poor at allowing might make sense. And appeal statistics, some examiners lose frequently on appeal. And so it's good to know that that route might be a more efficient way forward than continuing to talk with the examiner. It's just a graphical view of what some of these things look like. There's a little dashboard here, 3-year grant rate. The difficulty, easier, harder, whatever, is compared against other examiners, with the percentile there on the left. Grant rate timeline is where you can see when they're granting them, granting applications. And these graphs sometimes look really interesting, where it'd be very low before the first RCE and really climb after the first RCE, suggesting a behavior of the examiner to seek RCEs. And I also find the art unit predictor or comparison useful because sometimes even if an art unit has a relatively high allowance rate, particular examiners might be quite difficult in that art unit. And there it's often helpful to try and get a supervisor involved, simply because if the average art unit allowance rate is high and this one examiner is much lower than that, then getting another person from that art unit can often help. And then I'm going to hand it over to Andre to talk a little bit more about the additional functionality of the PatentBots word add-in.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I think the the add-in, which is an add-in to Word and adds this functionality to your toolbar, actually provides a very easy way to activate some of that functionality that Bill talked about without having to separately upload a document and go to a website. So if you'll see in the interface up there at the top left, it's got PatentBots, and it's got draft application, proof application, art unit predictor, and proof response. And there's also your utilities bar. So if you're working on a specification in Word, you can very quickly get access to a lot of those functions that Bill talked about just directly here. And then it pops up a window, or a sidebar actually in Word with a lot of that type of information. The one I just wanted to focus on is that that's kind of unique to the plugin aspect of this is the draft application, which gives you some tools to just help you, really speed along your drafting process. So you'll see in the right side of the interface there, it pops up this patent bots AWS, and there's a sidebar there which has navigation features and reference labels. Yeah, the navigation really just also, as in TurboPatent, kind of automatically identifies sections of the specification. And you can just quickly click on that to navigate to a part of your specification without having to scroll down. So you can just quickly jump to figure 3 or something like that. Again, saving just a little bit of time, but it all adds up. And then moving on to the next slide. If you click on the figures tab there, it actually gives you a list of all figures, and in that interface on the right, you can jump between mentions of a figure over there, and so you can jump to figure 2 and kind of scroll quickly jump between all mentions of figure 2. But one little feature that's particularly nice is it says a change number. You can actually renumber. If you're changing a drawing and as a TurboPatent moving it around, this, because there's no integration here between your drawings and the Word, you may want to move a figure around, and now you need to renumber the specification. So in this example over here, say you moved figure 6 to figure 7, you could go to that change column on the right, click on change number, and then if you can go to the next slide. You'll see there, basically you can change figure 6 and you can plug in the new number and change. And what that does is automatically go through the specification, changes all instances of figure 6 to figure 7 and renumbers any the reference numerals within figure 6 to corresponding reference numeral labels in figure 7. So just again, all these little tools which save people a bit of time and really reduce the burden of doing a lot of mechanical parts of editing, or where you're trying to you need to change a specification. But I do really like the the integrated where you can really working on a specification and call up a number of those tools that Bill mentioned over there. You can do directly within Word, so not having to go to a website, and also the the proofing over there. You can jump straight to if it finds an error with a reference numeral, you can click on that and it takes you straight to the location in Word, making it very easy to very quickly make any edits and changes, directly into the Word document again, without having to jump between a website and in your Word document. Anyway, with that, I'm going to hand back to Bill, who's going to talk about our next tool.
Yeah, so Clorganize was a tool we developed in-house, and it's a little bit different than the others in that primarily what it's addressing is the desire sometimes to have many more claims than you will ever file. And perhaps this is for different jurisdictions, or to have claim language that completely covers a disclosure, but you've got limits on your jurisdictional filing numbers, like 15 in Europe, or 3 and 24 in the US. And so what we needed was something that allowed us to tag claims and then use those tags to manipulate the claims. And so this is something we developed. Next slide, please. So the main issues that were coming up, attorneys were spending a lot of time to make sure that they had 8 claims that somehow would cover the entirety of the IDF, or 10 claims, whatever their final counts were. And the IDF subject matter then would get put into the application without necessarily having a corresponding claim, or there was a lot of effort being put into making these large claims, complex claims, etc. And even after that was done, say for a particular jurisdiction, the US, when you go to Europe or China, then you might have to redraft a different set of claims, hopefully just breaking out what you had there. But it just added extra work between them. And then finally, there's a lot of repetition between claim classes. And this is something that kind of came up in the Harity discussion, where, if you can do a method claim and some minor transformations can get you largely to have your system or CRM claims, why repeat that activity? And so what we started to do was to be able to claim to tag claims as far as what class they were in, and then also allow renumbering and subclass selections, and then renumbering on the fly between those based on the tags. And this really lets you do, say, a method claim and some minor transformations on your own to reach the other claim types, to label claims for the US, China, Europe in one document. And then when you need those claims to be produced, the tool just kicks out the set you want. And so this reduces drafting time, reduces drafting time, and increases flexibility a lot. The one other side effect of it is when you have the complete IDF claimed and you keep the master file, then you know what was claimed where, you know what aspects of the IDF have not yet been claimed for prosecution purposes, and you can quickly answer client questions. So if an IDF had two distinct ideas and one was claimed, you can relatively quickly answer which one was claimed and what is available. Okay, next slide, please. So primarily what the tool does is claim sets are marked, and here a set is just interrelated claims. So a method claim set, CRM claim set. Claim sets can also be like idea 1, idea 2, etc. But they're all, it's a interrelated claims. Once you've marked the claim sets, then duplicating for other sets, other types, another set is simply a matter of cutting and pasting, changing the tag, and then adjusting things like, say, verb form or adding nouns in a device or system. And then you can categorize the claims. Say for its US filing, CN filing, if it's a first filing and a second filing, the categories are quite flexible. Once you have that, then from the tool, you select the set, the order of the sets. So if you need to, say, put your device first, you can just select that in the tool in front of your method. And then your category, US, and it will output numbered claims, based on that selection. And once we had this, the other thing we can do with it is transform the claims for inclusion into application text. Another transformation we offer is between US single dependent, European multiply dependent claims, or just leaving the structure alone, which for things like US multiple dependent, PCT multiple dependent, there's really no programmatic way to know how people want those assembled, but we can almost always convert from that to single dependent or to the European style multiple dependent. And then for inclusion into the application text, some people might have seen this as claim-like examples in an application, or supporting a method flowchart that then can be edited by the attorney to add additional support. And here, my experience, I've been using this for 6 or 7 years. Drafting and revision time is reduced greatly, mostly because, as Greg mentioned, the inventors see one set of claims. There's not a repetition in making a revision to different sets. Is an extremely reduced time to tailor claims to different jurisdictions. So if we have US and EP, it's trivial to say, select my EP claims and make them EP multiply dependent, even though they weren't drafted that way. And that works really quite well. And like I said before, we have a record of unclaimed subject matter. And this has been really useful during prosecution. Both, if you cancel dependent claims and promote them into an independent claim, for example, I can fill out my claim count simply by looking at the claims in that jurisdiction that have not yet been presented to the examiner. So that is quite convenient. Next slide. And this is just a real quick example of an input on the left and what some of the output looks like on the right. You'll note in the square bracket are the categories, and you can see, say, on the M10, method 10, we have EP, CN, and US as the category, whereas for the CRM, they're all US, not as respected in other jurisdictions. And the other thing that's nice, you can do, like in that M12, we can do a European style multiple dependent for a CRM or a system, an M11, where the claim numbering is pushed throughout the claim. And then I think I'm handing it back over to Andre to.
Yes, yeah, perfect. No, thanks.
Hey, Andre,
yeah.
before you speak, I was just going to note that, you know, a lot of this work that gets done by patent counsel is death by 1,000 cuts, especially these administrative tasks of renumbering claims or changing their format. But the amount of time saved on this really adds up. But if you saved even just 15 minutes a day because you've mastered one of these tools, you can get higher quality, and you can get 50 hours of time savings over the course of a year. So these are people's time is so limited, and there's so much pressure to produce high quality patents quickly. These tools can be extremely important, to increasing productivity without increasing attorney stress, which is causing, mental health issues for everybody in the attorney profession. Just too much, time demands and not enough time to get everything done. So I just wanted to point that out, that these look like, oh, well, I could do that manually, but boy, I tell you what, 15 minutes a day gives you 1 week in Mexico. So anyways, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Steve, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more, and particularly these very mechanical type, where you are transforming claims from US to European formats. It takes a lot of time, but also, doing it manually, just the probability of, human error creeping in is high. So I just think the error, error reduction and quality improvement, in addition to the time saving, is well worth the effort. I totally agree. So we're now changing gears a little bit and kind of going into just looking at some of the production management tools that we deploy internally. I mean, obviously we've got very robust docketing, and particularly out of our docketing system foundation IP, we can program a number of reports which set off alarm bells if dates are approaching, and we've got a very robust set of docketing rules in there that are and that can, as Steve pointed out at the beginning, really be kind of customized for particular clients who want to see a report of upcoming deadlines and within a certain time frame, etc. But these tools over here are more just look at how do we within the organization, number one, try to achieve some kind of load balancing between our attorneys and really help attorneys and teams that may be overloaded, and also kind of identify attorneys that may be underutilized or light on work. It's very hard to get a global view, and people obviously raise their hands if they're running low on work. But I think these tools try to give us some a more normalized view of where things are at. And the other use for these is really just as an early warning system for problems. If someone has taken on more work than they can achieve, but not kind of realizing all their commitments and actually the time commitments, all of that really an early warning system. So again, just what we're trying to achieve with these tools is load balancing, capacity monitoring, also ensuring on-time delivery of applications and office action responses primarily. We kind of look at three kind of views. There's kind of a firm-wide view, a client team view, and then an individual attorney view. We're going to kind of walk through just some of the interfaces that we have for each of those. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. And this really shows a snapshot from an attorney loading dashboard, and we've obviously got more than 29 attorneys, but this is just a little example. So each bar of this chart represents a particular attorney. and provides an estimate of how many hours of uncompleted work are on their desks. So, for example, attorney 1 on the left there has approximately 320 hours of incomplete work, whereas attorney 28 in the other probably has 10 hours of incomplete work. In addition, it kind of breaks it down into 4 time buckets, with the blue being this is work that's past due. In other words, there's some due date in the docket system or somewhere that's kind of indicated that it's past due. And of course, you'll appreciate this is a hypothetical because no one at Schregman is we're never past due. But the orange is kind of what's due for that attorney in the next 30 days. The gray next 31 to 60, and yellow, what's due 60 to 90 days out. The estimation of those hours kind of looks at the docket, which office actions and applications on the attorney's docket. It makes some assumptions regarding the budget for those, and it also does factor in the attorney's hourly rates. So if we have an attorney at $400 an hour, it'll compared to attorney at $200 an hour, it'll obviously scale that accordingly, and it does update in real time based on time being entered into our time management system. So over there, we can kind of get a view, and what we might do here is just check in with attorney 1 that they're good to handle it, whereas maybe attorneys 25 and 26 are down are new attorneys that have started at the firm more recently and don't have much of a docket yet, or are primarily might be involved in not doing prep and prosecution but other types of work. So this just reflects their prep and pros dockets. So next slide also just shows a view of the same data but just in a different way, and this is kind of a color coded where we can very quickly identify if someone's running low on work. But you will see the attorney, I think it was attorney 16, has 100 hours in this hypothetical of undone work that might be, we've definitely got to speak to that person, and attorneys at the other end may be overloaded. Moving on to next slide. So this kind of just gives snapshots of work at across all attorneys at the firm, for example, within a time window. And we can kind of see there, what you're kind of just trying to monitor there is are things remaining relatively steady? Is the amount of work that's due in the next 30 days, remaining steady, or if it's spiking, that might we might investigate why that is, or if it's dropping substantially, as well. And also in those 4 time buckets that I mentioned. So the next slide, we kind of go into a client team view, and again, we find this very, very useful for a particular client if we've got a client team and new work comes in. This is one factor we take into who should we allocate it to. For new applications coming in, we'll often check if that attorney has worked with a particular inventor before. So if there's a new inventor on a case, we'll see which attorneys have been paired with that inventor. That's one factor. Obviously, technical expertise is something as well, but this is another input into that process. So if we see attorney 8's very busy over there, and obviously has probably would have relatively lower capacity to take on new work, so we would kind of factor that in kind of distributing work. The next slide also shows a view where we kind of differentiate between how much prep versus prosecution work is on a particular the desks of a particular client team. Orange there representing preparation work, and blue prosecution work. So that also gives us indication as to the work mix between attorneys on a particular team. And there we might see again, attorney 2 over there has got a lot of prosecution, or but is particularly light on preparation. So that attorney 2 may be a good candidate to take on a new case that came in for this particular client. This also gives for an individual attorney a view, and we distribute these reports to the attorneys, showing kind of spikes in where work is due. So this kind of looks at the docket and gives them kind of a view. The blue line is, hours remaining and when those are due. And the orange line gives them a view of, in order to get all their work done in time, how many hours would they need to work a day? So the orange line here is telling us, for this attorney to make sure that they, timely hit all the due dates, they should be working at about 6 point, maybe for the next 2 days, they need to work at a slightly higher rate, but then they can hit a stretch of, 6.25 hours. And then, then it kind of tapers off. But obviously, as new work comes in, that orange line gets pushed up. So that's just helpful for an attorney in assessing, how they should be planning their days. Next slide. So this is, the previous ones we looked at were attorney capacity or loading dashboards. This is an attorney performance dashboard, and indicates, for a particular attorney over a period of time that's definable, what percentage of their work product was delivered on time. And again, here, I think this, allows us to, identify, attorneys who, may potentially be struggling or overloaded or have taken on more than they can handle. And that gives us a good kind of a comparative view. Again, we don't, this is not a punitive or used for those purposes. It's merely just to really, reaching out to our attorneys and making sure that everyone's is not overcommitted or undercommitted. And then this final performance dashboard also breaks it out into, okay, so we got 4 data items here. The green is on-time applications. Black is number of late applications, yellow is on-time office action responses, and the purple is late office action responses. So here for a particular attorney, we can kind of get a quick sense of, are they being timely, or and where problems may exist. So attorney 2 over there is clearly has is doing a lot of office action work, and a good chunk of those are most of those are on time, whereas attorney 10 seems to be having late office actions. Very often there's kind of a if there's there might be a very good reason why an office action might be late. It may be that the client requested additional time to review, and in that case it's not a or the client review process may be backed up. So in that case, we will at least we can talk to the attorney and figure out what's going on. So not all of these where attorneys overdue is necessarily the attorney's fault, but at least it allows us to have conversations and detect things early. Okay, so that's all I had for those slides.
Well, thank you, Andre. And there was a question that was presented about where we get the data for this, and we get a lot of it comes out of Foundation IP, and other comes out of other resources we have as well, databases in the firm. I was going to note, just to close again, I wanted to the API capability to generate many of these analytics is very, very helpful, because you can automate all these things and pull the data, and you can get more interesting data sometimes than you can, or more real time than just pumping out static reports, which Foundation IP can do too. But again, the systems that currently offer really nice APIs that are out there being used a lot, CPA Global has, or Clarivate now has, a couple systems with great APIs, and they're very cooperative in that. And CPI, Patrick's, AppCall, are all systems with good APIs, and I encourage people to really look at this interoperability thing as much as they possibly can. Many of these tools that we're using here that we talked about today are interoperable. They can bring data in, export data. It's critical to being able to flow data back and forth, to have that interoperability. So I want to keep harping on that, because there are some laggards in our industry, some people or companies that are actually restricting that, and it's a total disaster for our business to tolerate that for even 1 minute. So anyways, thanks everybody for attending. We did have a couple last minute questions. One of them is for attorney work analyses. Since each application prep and OA prep is different, what are the parameters used to predict number of hours ahead behind? Andre, you want to take that one real quick?
Yeah, I know that I mentioned, we normally just assume, a kind of an average budget and, for those. So it's not a precise, and, some applications may have a lot. So it's more just really a allows us to do a comparison between the team, as opposed to an exact predictor. But it's
I think a lot of these stats we realize are can be very misleading. So you always need to drill underneath the hood, and when you see things that are really very anomalous, you want to go look and see what's going on. But a lot of times there's perfectly good reasons for that. I mean, one of them sometimes is someone gets transferred some cases from someone that left, and a lot of them are they get them in the middle, and so they're behind. So you can't hold anybody accountable for that. So those are the types of things where you'll see anomalies. And then somebody asked a question: do you each of you typically use all these tools? No, I think a lot of the tools are commonly used amongst many people, but some of the tools are used more by certain groups or certain clients than others. We do have libraries of templates that we assemble to use for clients, and when we plug them into these drafting tools, that can be hugely beneficial for speed of preparation, consistency, to make sure all the standard addressable items can be injected into these applications so that people don't overlook some things that are very valuable. And last one was interesting, there are tools for helping. So that was just a thank you. So I guess that would be wrapping it up for us. I want to thank the panelists again for their time and effort, and everybody for attending. And Michelle, do you want to take the audience through the next schedule and wrap it up for us, please?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and thank you to our speakers. The next episode of the Digital Transformation series will take place on May 13th, when we discuss prosecution, receiving and reporting PTO correspondence, docketing, data document storage, work packets, drafting and filing papers and responses, and reporting to clients. And you can find the registration page on the SLW Institute on the SLW website. And please keep an eye out for the email invitation as well. Thank you again for joining us, and be well.